Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the deeply unmarketable, uncomfortable truths of mindfulness, the ones that spiritual teachers and gurus are often just, well, too afraid to teach. Look, we live in an era where mindfulness is absolutely everywhere, right? It's sold to us in these slick ops and glossy weekend retreat brochures, but the reality is we're frequently only getting half the story. So we're going to unpack the neglected teachings that deliberately get left out of the marketing, mostly because they're incredibly hard to do, they definitely aren't exciting, and they often clash completely with what students actually want to believe. So we have to ask ourselves a pretty tough question right out of the gate here. Are you practicing mindfulness just to feel good, or are you doing it to actually find the truth? Because in our modern day-to-day lives, we constantly train our minds to crave instant gratification and euphoria. We scroll relentlessly on our phones, we're always looking for those quick fixes. And deep down, if we're being honest, we often just want our spiritual practices to be another pleasant distraction, rather than, doing the hard work of actually facing our underlying restlessness and suffering. This brilliant contrast really illustrates the divide. On one side, we've got marketable spirituality, the promise of expansive euphoria, instant stress relief, and, well, having fun. It's incredibly easy to sell. But then, on the complete opposite side, we have the neglected teachings. We're talking hard work, profound humility, sitting with absolute literal boredom, and confronting some incredibly ugly truths about ourselves. The modern wellness industry focuses so heavily on what's glamorous and accessible, while completely leaving behind the gritty, difficult practices that are actually required for genuine development. Section 1. Foundation over fireworks, the base of the iceberg. Let's move down to the base of our spiritual iceberg and look at the vital characteristics we absolutely have to develop before we can ever hope to sustain real insight. The source material shares a really fascinating personal anecdote about this. When the speaker first arrived in Thailand to study, he already had some psychic abilities and energy training. And because of these flashy spiritual fireworks, he felt this distinct lack of humility. He actually felt superior to his elders and actively struggled just to respectfully bow to them. But he later realized that cultivating genuine character and having the deep humility to respect others matters far, far more than any fleeting, exciting spiritual experience. And that lack of humility often leads us straight into what's called the trap of the intellect. When we come into a mindfulness practice, we very rarely arrive as a blank slate. We bring all our previous beliefs with us. We listen to a teacher and instantly start comparing and judging, thinking things like, oh, I like this part, but I really don't like that part. We essentially make ourselves the boss of the practice. But think about it. If we already know everything, why are we even in the class? To truly learn, we have to empty our cup first. You literally can't pour fresh tea into a cup that's already overflowing. That humility ties directly into our moral foundation, which, according to these traditions, is completely non-negotiable. And we're not just talking about the big, obvious rules here. It's about the deeply neglected moral foundations. Things like refraining from idle chatter just because you can't handle a few minutes of silence, which, let's be honest with ourselves, is a massive struggle for most of us today. It means having the mindfulness to stop harsh, confrontational words before they even leave your mouth, and committing to absolute non-harming. Yes, even toward insects. You just cannot develop deep mindfulness if your mind is constantly agitated by these everyday behaviors. Section 2. Confronting your blind spots. Going a layer deeper, we start to see how confronting our deeply held beliefs is absolutely essential, because our pre-existing worldviews can literally stop our progress dead in its tracks. The source brings up a really profound example. Imagine a devout religious practitioner who meditates and suddenly sees this brilliant sphere of concentration light. Now, in this framework, that's actually just an intermediate stage of deep focus. But because of their pre-existing beliefs, they might instantly assume they've seen heaven or some divine figure, and they just stop practicing right then and there. They use the experience just to puff up what they already believed, completely unwittingly trapping themselves in an illusion. And this extends to our everyday opinions too. The source impartially suggests that our deeply ingrained opinions, even our absolute strongest political stances, are not actually objective truths. From this specific spiritual perspective, they are simply mental fabrications. So when you watch the news, what you're witnessing, according to these teachings, is just a world of human suffering driven by mental defilements, like anger, delusion, and greed. Taking sides or obsessing over these worldly judgments just pulls you further into that exact same suffering. Which brings us to a massively neglected and, frankly, frequently misunderstood concept, karma. In this context, karma demands radical personal responsibility. It's the harsh reality that when negative events happen to you, even when someone is genuinely hurtful to you, It's viewed as a karmic reflection of your own past actions and the energy you've put out into the world. It completely and totally redefines our entire worldview. Because of this, we have to adopt radical responsibility. This means absolutely never blaming others for your suffering. If someone lets you down, a mature practitioner doesn't hold a grudge. Instead, they look at their own contribution to the conflict, they apologize internally, and they automatically apply metta, which is the practice of active, loving kindness, to try and understand the other person's hidden pain and struggles. It is incredibly hard to do. It's completely unmarketable, which is exactly why it constantly gets neglected. Section 3. The visceral and the unsexy. All right, now we reach the climax of this explainer, looking at practices that are almost never marketed because they are visceral, jarring, and, honestly, incredibly unsexy. Instead of seeking exciting euphoria and out-of-body fireworks, true practice requires us to sit with sheer, unadulterated boredom. We have to dismantle the illusion of our grand, special identity by breaking our physical body down into entirely mundane phenomena. That means spending hours upon hours simply noticing basic hardness, heaviness, tension, and temperature. You start to realize your physical body is essentially just an amalgamation of heat and movement, which slowly chips away at the delusion of the ego. We also have to stop romanticizing the world so much. Think about it. What happens the exact second beautiful, fine dining food enters your mouth? We love to obsess over perfectly plated meals with a little sprig of parsley on top, paying top dollar just for the aesthetic. But the literal second you put it in your mouth, these bones jutting out of your gums crush down on it and turn it into a warm, wet mush. Kind of ruins the magic, doesn't it? It's not so glamorous anymore. This builds to a profoundly neglected teaching, contemplating the foulness of the body. It's shocking for sure, but the source notes that in this specific meditative visualization technique, we actually have to recognize that this physical form we obsess over is essentially a putrid factory designed for producing sweat, urine, and excrement. If your concentration is deep enough, the practice involves literally visualizing your own intestines squeezing food through them like a moving worm. It is definitely not pretty, but it's a required practice in this tradition to forcefully detach us from our immense physical vanity. And then, we must contemplate death. It is the single, absolute certainty waiting for every single one of us the very moment we are born. Everything else in life, it can fail, or change, or just disappear at a moment's notice. But death is entirely guaranteed. Now, it's not at all pleasant to dwell on, I know, but facing this reality head-on, without looking away, is required if we want to stop wasting our precious, limited time on worldly, agitated distractions. Section 4. The sacrifice of liberation. So, how does all of this build to the ultimate goal? Well, true freedom is not about gaining more. It's actually about giving things up. Reaching liberation means sacrificing the very things that give us our worldly comfort. You have to give up unhelpful friendships, mindless entertainment, and our constant, exhausting desire for fun and excitement. It demands immense, unglamorous, day in and day out discipline. This leads to a final, pretty surprising truth that modern students almost never want to hear. According to the source, for fully enlightened beings who have completely eliminated worldly attachment and lust, there is a profound physical transformation. The text notes that all sexual drive entirely vanishes, literally to the point where their bodies actually stop producing sexual hormones and fluids altogether. The mental fabrications of lust are entirely gone, and the physical body literally alters itself to match that internal reality. Absolutely a game changer, but not exactly what they put on the brochure. So the crucial point to take away from this entire explainer is this. Genuine spirituality isn't just some weekend retreat designed to make you feel euphoric. It's about the brutal, unglamorous, and profound sacrifice required to discover the truth. It asks you to completely dismantle your ego, face your karma, and give up your worldly attachments. Which leaves us with one final, provocative question. Liberation requires the sacrifice of all worldly desires. Are you truly ready to be free? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning everything.